The city hummed like a warning as thunder pressed against the rooftop bar. "Maya Bennett," said Eli, "I am done hiding." Her voice shook, but her eyes held. Eli Park said, "Tell me it's real." She stepped closer, rain freckling her cheeks. Victor Hale appeared from the shadowed exit with a practiced smile. Victor said, "End this, or your mother's clinic loses funding tonight." Maya felt the ground tilt under the neon haze. Eli said, "What is he talking about?" Victor lifted his phone, a contract glowing like a blade. Maya said, "It's blackmail." Victor said, "It's a choice." The wind surged, and the rooftop lights flickered like a verdict. Maya ran for the stairwell, the metal door slamming like a judge gavel. Eli said, "Maya, wait." The corridor smelled of wet concrete and regret. Her phone buzzed with numbers that felt like shackles. Jenna Ortiz said, "Pick up, I'm here for you." Maya gripped the rail until her palm burned. Victor said, "Midnight is the deadline." The word echoed like thunder trapped indoors. Eli said, "Let me help." She wanted to believe him. Maya said, "If I choose wrong, my mother pays." The emergency light blinked, as if counting down her heart. The diner windows steamed, turning the street into a watercolor bruise. Jenna Ortiz said, "You don't owe him your life." Maya traced circles and spilled coffee. The neon open sign blinked like a tired eye. Maya said, "He has the clinic by the throat." Jenna said, "Then we use his leverage against him." Silverware chimed like small alarms. Maya said, "Eli deserves truth." Jenna said, "So do you." A jukebox whispered a sad chorus. The red vinyl seat cracked under choices older than tonight. In the parking lot, puddles held fragments of the city's broken crown. Eli said, "You prey on her fear." Victor said, "I protect investments." A security light buzzed like a trapped hornet. Eli said, "You will not decide her future." Victor stepped closer, smile gone to steel. Victor said, "Midnight, walk away, and the clinic breathes." Tires hissed past on wet asphalt. Eli said, "She is not a bargaining chip." Victor said, "Everyone pays for love." The rain answered like applause. Maya sat in her car, heater coughing against the damp. The dashboard clock glared like a witness. She dialed a number her bones still remembered. "Noah Reed," said Maya, "it's late." She swallowed the tremor. Maya said, "I need help with a contract." Paper rustled, old ghosts waking. Noah said, "Send it. I will read now." Relief and dread braided tight. Victor said, "Midnight or silence." A new message chimed. The screen lit the cabin like a siren. Morning light crawled across Maya's apartment, exposing sleepless shadows beneath her eyes. Jenna Ortiz said, "You cannot fight him alone." Maya said, "I cannot risk losing my mother's clinic." Eli Park knocked on the door, his voice muffled by distance. Eli said, "Let me in." Maya gripped her coffee cup, its warmth failing to ease her trembling hands. Jenna said, "He sees your fear, and he feeds on it." Maya whispered, "What if I am not strong enough?" The sound of Eli's knock grew more insistent, each thud echoing like the clock inside her chest. Silence pressed until the choice weighed heavier than breath. Eli stood in the hallway, rain-damp jacket clinging, his fist against the door. Eli said, "Maya, don't shut me out." Inside, she pressed her forehead to the wood, voice trembling. Maya said, "If I let you in, you'll never escape this." Eli's breathing was heavy, every exhale carrying both anger and fear. Jenna whispered, "He is already in this fight, whether you want him to be or not." Maya shut her eyes. The door, a thin wall between salvation and ruin. Eli said, "I am not leaving you again." His words thudded harder than his fists. At the clinic's waiting room, silence pressed heavier than illness. Maya said, "This place cannot close." Her mother's voice played in memory, reminding her why she fought. Eli sat beside her, his knee bouncing, his hands restless. Eli said, "Victor can be beaten." A child coughed softly across the room, innocence tangled in fear. Maya looked at the clinic's fading posters and broken tiles. Maya said, "Everything feels fragile, Eli." He leaned close, eyes burning. Eli said, "Then we make it unbreakable." Her pulse caught between dread and fragile hope. Victor's office gleamed with steel and glass, power humming in silence. Victor Hale said, "You waste time running." Maya stood before his desk, shoulders squared though her heart rattled. Maya said, "You will not destroy us." Victor's lips curled with practiced cruelty. Victor said, "You cannot protect love and keep what you owe." The city skyline burned behind him, golden towers mocking her fight. Eli's voice cracked from the doorway. Eli said, "She does not stand alone." Victor leaned back, smile sharpening, his fingers drumming like a clock's countdown. Back at the apartment, the storm outside returned with full force. Maya collapsed on the couch, exhaustion pulling her into shadows. Jenna Ortiz said, "You are not alone." Maya said, "But I feel like I am drowning." Eli sat across, leaning forward, his hands clasped like prayer. Eli said, "We will fight him together." Lightning cracked, the room flashing white, exposing raw fear carved into their faces. Jenna whispered, "Then let tonight be the start, not the end." The storm raged, but in their silence, a fragile unity spark. The church bells rang, not for joy but as a hollow warning. Maya Bennett said, "I cannot keep lying." Eli Park stood in the courtyard, rain misting his hair. Eli said, "Then tell me everything." Her chest tightened as she glanced at the clinic bills tucked into her purse. Victor Hale's voice echoed from memory. "Love will cost you blood." The storm clouds thickened, darkening stone walls like an omen. Eli said, "We can fight him together." Maya whispered, "But fighting him means losing everything else." The bell tolled again, dragging her heart with every strike. Inside the chapel, candles flickered against shadows carved into the walls. Maya said, "I never told you about Victor's deal." Eli's eyes hardened. Eli said, "He's bleeding you dry." She felt guilt spread like wildfire. Jenna Ortiz slipped into the pew, her voice steady. Jenna said, "Secrets rot faster than love." The hymn of silence was louder than any choir. Maya lowered her head, tears trembling on lashes. Eli reached across the pew, his hand shaking but open. Maya whispered, "I am afraid you'll leave if you know it all." The silence burned brighter than flame. The cafe across from the clinic smelled of burnt espresso and betrayal. Victor Hale leaned at the counter, smirking as if he owned the air. Victor said, "Every day you delay, patients suffer." Maya froze, her reflection trembling in the window. Eli muttered, "You enjoy their pain." Victor's laugh cracked like glass. Victor said, "It's business, not pleasure." The clink of cups felt like nails on stone. Maya said, "You want control, not money." Victor tilted his head, eyes sharp as knives. He said, "Control is love's only currency." Her hands clenched, the truth cutting deeper than lies. On the bridge, water rushed below like 1,000 broken promises. Maya said, "He will destroy me." Eli grabbed her arm gently, desperation in his grip. Eli said, "Not if I stand with you." Headlights streaked past like ghostly warnings. Maya said, "You will drown with me." His eyes shone wet under the streetlights. Eli said, "Then drown, I will." The roar of the river below swallowed her reply. She turned away, clutching her pendant as if it could hold her soul together. The bridge trembled with the storm's breath, echoing her unraveling. Maya returned home to find an envelope on her doorstep, the paper already wet with rain. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. Inside, photos spilled, Victor's proof of surveillance. Eli said, "He's watching us." Maya's pulse pounded, shame and fury tangling. Jenna whispered, "He wants you to collapse before you fight." Lightning illuminated the photos, each image crueler than the last. Maya said, "He wants me broken." Eli clenched his jaw. Eli said, "Then we break his hold, not ourselves." The storm raged outside, but the true violence breathed within the walls. The courthouse steps were slick with rain, reflecting the looming storm clouds that hung over them. Each raindrop felt like a heavy sigh, like the world was collectively holding its breath. Maya Bennett's voice cracked as she looked up at Eli. "He forced me into this contract. It wasn't a choice, Eli. It never was." She could hear the echo of her own words bouncing off the stone, as though the courthouse itself rejected her plea. Eli Park stood at her side, fists clenched at his sides, his shoulders tense and rigid. "Then we fight him here," Eli said, his voice low, but it carried the weight of a promise. They both looked up as Victor Hale descended the stairs, his steps slow and deliberate, as if he were walking through an art gallery instead of a battlefield. He was the predator, and they were the prey. "Fight me, and the clinic dies before sunrise," Victor said with a chilling smile, his eyes glinting like shards of glass. Maya's heart dropped into her stomach. She felt the weight of the moment. "Why do you hate me this much?" she whispered, the words more fragile than she meant them to be. Victor paused for a split second, and for the briefest of moments, the smug mask slipped. There was something deeper lurking in his gaze. He took another step forward. "Because you're a threat," he said, as cold as the wind that whipped through them. The gavel of silence fell, and in that moment, everything shifted. The courthouse interior felt like a cold, sterile labyrinth. The high ceilings echoed every step, every breath, as though they were prisoners of this place. Maya sat at the front, her shoulders hunched, staring blankly ahead, feeling the weight of every gaze on her. The judge had not yet entered, but the silence was enough to suffocate her. "This is not justice, this is ransom," Maya murmured, barely above a whisper. Eli Park, seated beside her, leaned in, his voice shaking but full of resolve. "Then we fight it, Maya. We fight him in the only place he can't control. Right here, in this room." Maya could feel the tension in his words, but her heart pounded as though it were trapped inside a cage. Victor Hale stood across from them, calm and collected, his every move calculated. "Call it what you want. It's still binding," he said, his voice oozing disdain. His words were like a dagger, sharp and precise. Eli slammed his hand on the bench in frustration, his voice rising. "You will not bury her under your lies, Victor." The sound of his fist hitting the wood echoed through the room, but it did nothing to diminish the tension. Maya lowered her head, her hands trembling as she fought to steady herself. "Every choice feels like death," she whispered, barely able to keep her composure. Victor leaned in, his face hard as stone. "Then choose the death you can live with," he said coldly. The fluorescent lights buzzed above them, adding to the oppressive atmosphere, each hum louder than the words spoken. The storm outside intensified, mirroring the chaos inside Maya's mind. The rooftop where they had once shared hopes now felt like a battlefield. The wind howled through the broken city below, and rain lashed against the walls, as if nature itself was protesting what was happening. Maya stood at the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the city that felt more like a prison than a home. Eli Park approached from behind, his footsteps muted by the wind. "He owns me until midnight," Maya said, her voice hollow, as if she were already defeated. Eli grabbed her shoulders, his touch grounding her in the chaos around them. "No," he said firmly, his voice intense. "You own yourself, Maya." His words felt like fire, a spark in the storm. Maya's tears mixed with the rain falling down her cheeks as she whispered, "If I break the contract, the clinic dies. If I sign, I die inside." Her voice broke, and she felt the walls closing in on her. Eli's hand moved to her cheek, brushing away the water and tears. "Then we burn his chains," Eli said softly, but with such force it felt like a battle cry. She turned to face him, feeling both the weight of his words and the fear that gripped her heart. Victor Hale's shadow lingered in her mind, taunting her. The storm cracked above, and the sky tore open, as if reflecting her inner turmoil. Maya closed her eyes, letting the rain wash over her. But she couldn't wash away the decision that had to be made. Inside the apartment, the weight of their choices seemed to crush the walls. The kitchen was dim, the only light coming from a flickering lamp that illuminated their worn faces. Jenna Ortiz sat across from Maya, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, her eyes filled with empathy but also resolve. "He cannot own your soul unless you hand it over," Jenna said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil around them. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the table, her thoughts running wild. "But what if I already did?" Maya replied, her voice a whisper, barely audible. The words felt like they were suffocating her. Eli stood near the window, his back to them, pacing as he tried to sort through his thoughts. His voice cracked with emotion. "Then we take it back," Eli said fiercely, his frustration leaking through. Jenna reached out, placing her hand on Maya's. "You've always had control," Jenna whispered. "You just have to remember that." The clock on the wall ticked louder with every passing second, as if mocking their indecision. Maya closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to steady the storm inside her. But the reality of the decision still loomed large. "If I choose wrong, I lose him. I lose everything," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. The clock struck 11, and time felt like it was slipping through their fingers, each second carrying the weight of an entire lifetime. Midnight arrived like a thief, stealing the last remnants of hope. Maya sat on the floor of her apartment, the contract spread out before her. Her hands shook as she stared at the ink, the final decision looming. Victor Hale's words echoed in her mind, cold and relentless. "Sign or watch it all burn." Her fingers hovered over the paper, the weight of the moment nearly too much to bear. "If I choose wrong, I lose everything," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Eli knelt beside her, his hand near hers but not touching, as though he were afraid his touch might break her further. "I would rather lose everything than lose you," Eli said, his voice full of raw emotion, but also fierce determination. Maya felt the tears slide down her face as the gravity of his words settled over her. Her chest tightened, the choice too big for any one person to carry. But she couldn't bear the thought of losing him, or everything they had fought for. The clock struck 12, and the world felt like it was holding its breath. The room was still, and for the first time in days, Maya felt the weight of her decision clear. But it came with a price. She had to face it. The phone call came at midnight, cutting through the silence like a blade. Maya Bennett answered, her hand shaking as her thumb hovered over the screen. "Maya, it's Jenna. You need to listen carefully." Jenna's voice crackled through the phone. The world seemed to stop. "Victor, he's been playing both sides," Jenna continued. Maya's heart raced. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, the words catching in her throat. "He's been working with your ex to sabotage the clinic," Jenna revealed. The air seemed to freeze, each word sinking deeper than the last. "How could you not tell me this?" Maya gasped, barely breathing. Jenna's tone grew urgent. "Because we didn't have the proof until now. You need to confront him, Maya. Now." Maya's hand dropped to her side, her mind a whirlwind of disbelief. "I don't have much time." Jenna's voice trembled. Maya hung up the phone, her world suddenly crumbling. The truth tore at her heart like a vicious storm. Eli appeared in the doorway, his eyes questioning. "What's wrong?" he asked, but the words caught in her throat. She barely whispered, "Victor and my eggs, they've been in this together." Her knees buckled beneath her as the enormity of the betrayal washed over her. The wind howled through the cracked window as Maya and Eli walked toward the car, the city streets slick with rain. The truth was like poison in her veins, but she knew she couldn't go back now. "We have to confront Victor," she said, her voice barely a whisper, her breath visible in the cold night air. Eli glanced at her, his eyes filled with both fear and determination. "We're doing this together, Maya. He won't break us," Eli said, his voice unwavering, but the fear in his eyes spoke volumes. Maya nodded, But deep down, doubt gnawed at her. What would they find when they confronted him? Would they finally shatter his hold over her? The night seemed darker than before, as though the city itself were waiting for the inevitable confrontation. The car's headlights illuminated the rain-slicked streets as they drove, but the glow of the city felt far away, too distant for comfort. "We'll find the truth," Eli said, breaking the silence between them. Maya didn't respond. She only stared ahead, her heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. Victor Hale's office felt colder than ever, its pristine surfaces gleaming under the harsh lights. Maya walked in, her every step echoing like a countdown. "You knew," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Victor looked up, his cold gaze flicking to her, and for a moment, the facade cracked. "You don't understand, Maya," Victor said, his tone quieter than usual. "I didn't want this for you." Maya felt a chill creep up her spine as the truth unfolded before her. "Then why did you do it?" she demanded, her voice shaking with the enormity of the betrayal. Victor's eyes hardened, and for the first time Maya saw the cracks in his perfect persona. "Because this is business, Maya. This is the only way I could control the situation," Victor admitted, his voice cold and detached. "You're a pawn in a game bigger than you." Maya took a step back, the weight of his words sinking in like a stone in her chest. Eli stood beside her, his face grim, but his eyes never leaving Victor. Maya's voice shook with fury. "I will never be your pawn." The storm outside raged as Maya and Eli stood in the hallway, the door to Victor's office slamming shut behind them. Maya was trembling, the weight of the truth crushing her chest. "He knew," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Eli turned to her, his hand on her shoulder, trying to steady her. "He's been playing us both," Eli said, his anger barely contained. Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with exhaustion and betrayal. "How do we fight someone who's always been 5 steps ahead?" she asked, her voice cracking. "We keep moving forward," Eli said, his voice firm, but Maya could hear the uncertainty beneath it. "We fight for what's ours." But Maya knew the truth. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The storm outside intensified, and the pounding rain seemed to match the chaos inside her heart. "Do you think we can win?" she asked, her voice filled with doubt. Eli's grip on her shoulder tightened, and for a moment, they stood in the hallway together, facing the storm that threatened to tear them apart. Back in the car, the city streets seemed quieter, as if the world had taken a breath. Maya stared out the window, her mind reeling with everything that had happened. Eli's voice broke through her thoughts. "We can still fight this," he said, but his words were empty, even to him. Maya turned to him, her eyes searching his face for the strength she once saw there. "What if we've already lost?" she whispered. Eli's gaze softened, and he reached out to take her hand. "Then we fight anyway," he said. "We've come this far, Maya. I won't let you face this alone." Maya squeezed his hand, but the fear in her chest didn't subside. "What if it's too late?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Eli's thumb brushed over her hand, his touch grounding her. "It's never too late. We fight for us, for the clinic, for everything we've built." But Maya wasn't so sure. The truth had already shattered everything, and as the car moved through the darkened streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too far gone. The tension between Maya and Victor reached its peak in the crowded boardroom. Maya stepped forward, her voice trembling but fierce. "I'm done being your puppet, Victor," she declared, each word slicing through the thick silence. Victor's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You don't know what you're asking for," he said coolly, his voice calculated. The room felt suffocating, every eye watching them, every breath held. Eli Park stood at Maya's side, his jaw clenched, eyes unwavering. "You're not in control anymore," Eli said, his voice sharp, cutting through the tension. Victor's gaze flicked to Eli, and for a moment, a flicker of doubt passed through his eyes. "You're both making a mistake," Victor warned, his tone menacing. "This is bigger than you can imagine." Maya took a step closer, refusing to be intimidated. "I've been living in fear of you for too long. Not anymore." Victor's expression hardened. Then get ready to face the consequences, he spat. His words echoed through the room, and Maya felt the weight of what she was about to do. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everything that mattered. The final confrontation had arrived. Maya stood before Victor's private office, the door open, revealing the darkened interior. Eli Park moved to her side, his hand brushing against hers in a silent show of support. "Are you ready?" Eli asked, his voice low, filled with uncertainty. Maya didn't answer at first. She only nodded, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. Her breath was shallow, her heart pounding in her ears. Inside the office, Victor was already waiting, his posture relaxed, but there was no doubt in his eyes. "I thought you'd come sooner," Victor said, his tone smooth, as though nothing had changed. Maya stepped into the room, her voice unwavering despite the storm of emotions inside her. "This ends now." She moved toward him, each step a declaration of defiance. Victor stood from his chair, a cold smile tugging at his lips. "You think you can defeat me?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Maya met his gaze, her voice firm. "I don't need to defeat you. I just need to walk away." Victor's cold laugh filled the air. "You think you can walk away? You've already made your choice." His words were sharp, filled with a sinister promise. Maya stepped back, feeling the weight of his words, but she refused to falter. "I've made my choice," Maya said, her voice steady, "and it's not you." Eli's hand rested gently on her back, his presence a constant source of strength. "This isn't about power," Eli said, his voice low and resolute. "It's about control, and we're done giving it to you." Victor's smile faltered, and in that brief moment of vulnerability, Maya saw the cracks in his armor. "You've been playing a dangerous game, Maya," he said, his tone darkening, "and now you'll face the consequences." Maya took a deep breath, the reality of what she was doing settling in. She wasn't just walking away from Victor, she was walking away from a life she had built around him. She was finally free. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," Maya said, her voice clear, defiant. "This ends tonight." As the tension reached its peak, the door to the office burst open. Jenna Ortiz stepped in, her eyes fierce, her voice unwavering. "You've lost, Victor." Her words hit like a shot in the dark, and for the first time, Victor looked truly rattled. Maya looked at Jenna, a wave of relief washing over her. "You knew?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jenna nodded, her expression hard. "We had to wait for the right moment." The room seemed to shrink around them as Victor's expression twisted with disbelief. "You think you've won," he sneered, his eyes wild. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." But Maya stood her ground, her gaze unflinching. "No," she said, her voice firm. "It's over now." The weight of the moment hit her like a wave, and for the first time she felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. She had fought for everything she believed in, and now she was free. Victor's anger turned to cold rage as he glared at them, but Maya didn't flinch. She knew she had made the right choice. She had taken control of her life, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. Maya stood in front of the clinic, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds. The storm had passed, and the world felt quieter, as if it had exhaled a collective sigh. "We did it," Maya said softly, her voice almost a whisper. Eli stood beside her, his presence steady, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You did it," Eli corrected her, his voice filled with pride. Maya looked up at him, a smile finally breaking through the exhaustion that had weighed her down. "We did it," she repeated, her voice stronger now, filled with certainty. The clinic stood before them, untouched by the chaos that had nearly destroyed it. "It's not over," Maya said, her voice soft but firm. "But it's a new beginning." The weight of everything that had happened hung in the air, but now it was different. They had faced their demons and come out stronger. The future was uncertain, but for the first time Maya felt ready to face it. "Let's go inside," she said, taking a deep breath. "We have a lot of work to do." Maya stood at the edge of the clinic's entrance, the morning sun casting a soft glow over the building, as if the world were gently waking up. The events of the past days felt like a distant nightmare, but the scars remained. Eli Park walked beside her, his steps steady, his presence comforting. "We made it through," Eli said quietly, his voice filled with reverence. Maya nodded, the weight of the journey still pressing on her chest. "We did," she replied softly. But as she looked at the clinic, she knew the real work had just begun. The battle for its future, for her future, was far from over. They had fought for this moment, but now they had to rebuild from the ground up. "It's not the end," Maya said, her voice firmer now. "It's the beginning." Her hand tightened around the door handle, ready to step forward. "This is where we make it ours," she added, the resolve in her eyes matching her words. The clinic was theirs now, and so was the future. They were no longer victims of circumstance. They were the authors of their own story. Inside the clinic, Maya and Eli stood amidst the chaos of papers, tools, and the sound of workers getting ready to reopen the doors. The walls still bore the scars of Victor's reign, but there was something new in the air, a sense of renewal. "It's going to take time," Maya said, wiping the dust off a countertop, her voice steady despite the lingering exhaustion. Eli leaned against the wall, watching her work. "You've already done more than anyone expected," Eli said, his voice filled with admiration. Maya didn't respond immediately, her focus on the task at hand. The clinic may have been hers, but it felt like there was so much more to prove. "I haven't done it yet," Maya said softly. "We haven't done it yet." Eli stepped forward, his hand brushing hers as they worked together. "We will," he said, his voice warm, full of promise. "We're in this together." Maya looked up at him, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of her burden lighten. "Together," she repeated, her heart finally finding its rhythm again. The phone rang, shattering the quiet moment between Maya and Eli. Maya picked it up, her heart racing with uncertainty. "Maya?" It was Jenna's voice on the other end. "We've got the evidence." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. "The documents we've been waiting for," Jenna replied, her tone serious. "Victor's deals with your eggs, everything is in these files." Maya's eyes flickered to Eli, who was watching her closely. "Send it to me," Maya said, trying to steady her breathing. "Now." The weight of the evidence felt like an anchor, pulling her back into the fight she thought she had left behind. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Jenna asked. Maya hesitated, but only for a moment. "I'm sure," she said, her voice now strong and unwavering. "It's time to finish this." The fight wasn't over. It was just taking a new turn. Maya sat at her desk, the files spread out before her, her mind racing. She had always known that the battle was far from over, but now, with Victor's betrayal fully exposed, she felt a strange sense of power. "I never thought this would be how it ended," Maya said, her voice quieter now, almost contemplative. Eli was beside her, watching as she sifted through the documents. "It's not over yet," Eli said, his voice low. "But we've got what we need to take him down." Maya paused, looking up at him. "And what about me?" she asked, her voice soft. "What happens when this is all done?" Eli smiled gently, taking her hand in his. "You get to choose what comes next," he said. "You've already taken control of your life. This is just one more chapter in your story." Maya took a deep breath, the weight of the past few weeks finally lifting. "One more chapter," she repeated, a small smile tugging at her lips. It was a new beginning, not just for the clinic, but for her. The clinic doors opened to a new day. The waiting room was filled with people, patients, workers, and the hum of new life. Maya stood in the doorway, watching it all unfold, a sense of peace finally settling in her heart. Eli stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "We did it," Maya said, her voice filled with both relief and exhaustion. "Together," Eli added, his voice warm, full of promise for the future. Maya looked at the clinic, the walls now filled with hope rather than fear. The future was no longer uncertain. It was hers to shape. "This is where we start again," Maya said, her voice steady. "No more running." Eli smiled, a look of pride in his eyes. "No more running," he repeated. Maya took a deep breath, her heart finally at ease. She had fought for this, and now it was time to live it. With Eli by her side, the clinic was not just a building. It was a symbol of their strength, their resilience, and the love they had fought for.